When my parents secretly charged a $20,000 wedding venue to my credit and then blamed me for refusing to pay, I chose my son, my sanity, and my receipts. The fallout stretched over years, through hospital rooms, courtrooms, and a quiet funeral, until I finally learned what family means. The first voicemail from the Opal House hit while the nebulizer on my dining table was still hissing. Miles sat cross-legged, eyes on the little fish stickers we'd put on the plastic mask. His hair was messy, his freckled nose scrunched with concentration, and that soft little whir filled the room like a clock nobody wanted to hear. The message was bright and courteous. "Hi, this is Laura from the Opal House events. Just following up on your outstanding balance. We still haven't received the second installment for the Franklin Lane wedding, and your card on file declined. Can you call me back?" I stared at my phone. The nebulizer fog curled into the late afternoon light, a ghost of our ordinary life still trying to exist. I replayed the message, then looked at Miles. He lifted his hand, a gentle wave, like he was cheering me on from the middle of all that plastic and air. I called back. By the time I hung up, the room felt smaller. The number, 20,000, didn't fit. It had weight. It pressed into my ribs as I stood there, listening to the machine's final soft cough. 20,000 on my credit for a wedding I wasn't invited to plan and wasn't sure I'd even get to show up to. Not because I didn't want to. Because the people who did this had always told me I was the one who cleaned things up. The one who understood. The one who would save the day and then be scolded for the weather. Before I knew it, I was in my car, engine not yet started, forehead pressed to the steering wheel. My phone buzzed. Another voicemail. A bright ring of a woman's laugh in the background. My sister Jenna, saying, "Aaron. Hey, don't freak out. Mom said she talked to you. It's just a little thing, okay?" I had to sit with that. A little thing that would echo in every room of my life. Before it broke. I grew up in Riverton, a mid-sized town with just enough chain restaurants to be familiar and just enough old trees to feel like you could get lost. Our house had a cracked driveway and a basketball hoop that leaned like it had something to say. My mom, Susan, ran a salon out of the converted garage. My dad, Rick, had a car lot with a name he painted himself on the side, Rick's Reliable Rides, like he could speak reliability into existence with a red brush and stubbornness. They weren't villains. They were complicated in ways that, for a long time, I mistook for love. I was the older daughter. Responsible, quiet, short hair. I cut myself in our bathroom mirror the summer between 8th grade and freshman year. My sister Jenna arrived with big eyes and a laugh that made our neighbors open their windows. When teachers mentioned her, they always said the same thing. "Oh, Jenna. She just lights up a room." I was good with forms. Paperwork. Schedules. The unglamorous connective tissue of a family that relied on adrenaline more than plans. If there was a crisis, a broken taillight, or a forgotten payment, my name was the one my mom said like an answer. The summer I turned 23, Dad asked me to co-sign a loan for a wholesale purchase of 3 trucks he was sure he could flip by September. He wore his "we're a team" face when he asked. I believed him. He missed the first payment, then the second. I worked double shifts at the coffee shop to keep my score from cratering. We shrugged it off as a lesson. Family steps up, Dad said. Sometimes it gets messy. My credit recovered slowly. I learned how to set up auto-pay faster than anyone in the zip code. I was 25 when Miles was born. His dad, Derek, and I loved each other the way you love someone you met on a sunny day when everything felt possible. We were good for a while, then not. We untangled our lives before we tied them up in knots, and we chose to be gentle. He moved to Columbus for work when Miles was 3. He sends thoughtful gifts, and we talk on birthdays and big days, and he comes when he can. I became a speech-language pathologist and took a job at Lincoln Elementary. I love the way kids will try again. How they lean into the sounds we take for granted and make them brave. The school sits a few blocks from Riverton Regional Medical Center, a comfort I didn't know I'd cling to until much later. Jenna met Tyler at a 4th of July festival by the river. He wore a white baseball cap, backwards. He spun her around under the fireworks, and I thought, well, that tracks. He's a contractor with a gray truck and a dog I wanted to steal. They moved into a small rental on Mulberry. Pizza boxes stacked by the fridge, a couch that had seen some things. Happy. Loud. The kind of new love that makes you remember possibilities and then politely ask them to leave your gaze so you can keep driving. She got engaged at the county fair, near the Ferris wheel. The ring sparkled like it wanted to scream. She called me from the parking lot, and I could hear our mom in the background, telling someone I told her. She's a catch. I saw the ring that night in our parents' living room, under the slanted lamplight that always made skin look a little more tired or a little more honest. Mom had a bridal magazine open to an ad for the Opal House. It was an old estate outside town that had been given new floors and new life, with tall windows and vines that didn't look like they came from our soil. The price tag attached to the photos wasn't what we were raised with. It's not crazy, Mom said, tapping it with a red nail. They have packages. Your Aunt Lori can do flowers. Your father has connections. Dad looked up like a man summoned into hope. They owe me favors, he said. You'd be surprised how much you can buy with a good word and a handshake. Jenna held the magazine and turned it like she was trying to catch a different light. I don't need fancy, she said, and we all looked at her like she'd said she didn't need air. I mean, I do, but we'll figure it out. We were all figuring it out. That was the family motto. Figure it out. One Tuesday night, at my dining table, with Miles working a dinosaur coloring book beside me, Mom looked at the stack of envelopes by my elbow and said, "You always look so calm." It wasn't a compliment so much as a question. "How are you doing that?" her face asked, and "Why aren't you doing that for me?" I said, "Budgets." She snorted. "Oh, that thing." "Yeah, that thing." She knew my credit was okay now because she'd asked. She knew I had a card with a decent limit because she'd been with me at urgent care when Miles had a cough that had scared me, and I paid with it. She'd said, "It must feel good not to have to ask Dad for everything," and I'd said, "It does," and then I'd tucked the card away like something that needed privacy. Jenna started sending venue Pinterest boards with captions that were more dream than plan. When I said, "Maybe we can do something cute and simple at the community center," she sent a heart and then another photo of the Opal House staircase, covered in roses. "Tyler's mom says she'll help," she texted. "Mom says we have family money. She said you know how to do that stuff. Like, move money around." I typed, "I don't move money around, I pay bills," but I deleted it and sent a thumbs up instead. I have a proud collection of the things I didn't say. By spring, my parents were hosting dinners for anyone who still loved free food. Dad grilled aspirational steaks on the deck, and Mom staged the table like a magazine, cloth napkins folded into triangles and 2 candles burning down too fast. Dad had the usual drink, a bourbon in a glass he swore made it taste better. He raised it and said, "To my girls," and everyone cheered and sipped. He pulled me aside in the kitchen later, when the room smelled like garlic and wet corks. "We'll take care of her day," he said. "Family thing. Don't worry." The thing about family is that the words "don't worry" are often the opposite of permission. They're more like a lid being fitted to a pot that's already boiling. Miles fell asleep on the couch that night, under a blanket with planets on it. The lid rattled. I learned to pick it up by the handle, to let the steam out in small, careful ways. I didn't know yet how hot it would get. Pressure builds. The first time I saw the Opal House up close, it was in late May, when things were still green and theater kid dramatic. The house sat on a hill that used to belong to a family whose last name is now a road. Tall, pale, windows like eyes that didn't blink. "Imagine it," Mom said, stepping onto the gravel in sandals that weren't meant for gravel. Jenna coming down those stairs, everyone standing, Tyler crying like a baby, but in a manly way, obviously. Jenna laughed and pushed her shoulder. "Mom. Don't mom me, you know he'll cry." She looped her arm through mine and tugged me toward the front doors. "You think we can make this work?" I stood there, in the driveway, thinking about my car payment and Miles's inhalers and the $350 I had in my savings account that made me feel invincible and broke at the same time. "It's beautiful," I said. It was true and also not the point. Laura met us in the foyer, all smiles and binder tabs. She made weddings sound like science. You just follow the steps and the day is yours. The staircase glittered politely. Jenna touched the banister like it was a living thing. And what about payment? Mom asked, like she was asking, and what about dessert? We ask for a non-refundable deposit up front, Laura said. Then we break the balance into 3 installments. If you're booking peak season, it's $20,000 for venue and basic package. Plus catering if you're using our kitchen, which most people do. 20, Mom repeated. She said it like 20 was a number she'd known intimately once and wanted to get reacquainted with. I took a brochure and folded it into my bag, like a secret that was also a warning. Jenna's face turned toward mine, seeking. I smiled, because that's what I did. My smile is a multi-tool, built to pry us out of hard corners and make a shelf for later. We left with polite handshakes. In the parking lot, Mom said, if we put down the deposit, we can do the rest in chunks. Your father can sell the Ranger, and I can do extra hands on weekends. The deposit is most of it, I said. She waved me off. We'll make it work. In June, I got an email from my bank, noting a large purchase that seemed out of ordinary spending. I was in my car in the school lot on the first day of summer session, my favorite, because the building goes quiet and the kids who need extra became the only thing on the calendar. I skimmed it, heart kicking. Merchant, the Opal House. The number landed with a thud. My palms went slick. I called my mom before I even messed with the fraud alert. What is this? I said, skipping hello because I was suddenly allergic to the nice edges of everything. It's fine, she said, immediately. Don't worry. We put down a deposit so we could lock the date. We'll pay you back before the bill hits. You won't even see it on the statement. You used my card? It's the same number you gave me for the urgent care last year, she said. I still had it in my wallet. You kept my card number. Erin, she said, in that tone that made me 15 again. It's family. Of course we did. You always say we should be prepared. Prepared for what? I wanted to ask. For the chance to take something because it felt like you'd earned it? You can't do this without asking me, I said. I was aware of the kids' laughter on the sidewalk, the way a June breeze crawled through my cracked window. You cannot do this. We're doing it, she said. And I'm telling you. So now you know. It'll be fine. It's a $20,000 deposit. She exhaled like I was slow. And? It's the deposit for a once-in-a-lifetime thing. It's important. No, I said. My son's medicine is important. My mortgage is important. Jenna's wedding is her wedding. You cannot put $20,000 on my card and tell me not to worry. We'll pay you, she said, quickly. Before the statement posts. I swear. How? Silence. Then the sounds of the salon water, laughter, the muted buzz of a blow dryer. We'll figure it out. I closed my eyes. You can't just tell me after. You need my consent. You're doing it again, she said. Making everything hard. We're a family. We're not strangers. She hung up before I could say anything else. My phone hovered in my hand like a thing that had weight and none at the same time. I called the bank, explained that this was not authorized. The woman on the line asked, do you recognize the card number? Yes, it's mine. Is the merchant familiar? Yes, I'd been there. Do any other parties have permission to use this card? No. She said, we'll open a dispute, but because it's a known party and doesn't appear to be card-present fraud, we may require a police report. I pressed my thumb to my forehead. Okay. Ma'am, she added, softer. You can also freeze your card for now. I did. I sat in my car and I locked everything. Then I texted Jenna, because I still believed she might say, I didn't know, I'm so sorry, I'll fix it. She sent back, Mom said it was fine. Don't be mad. We'll hustle and pay you before it's due. You worry too much. That night, Miles wheezed in his sleep the way he sometimes did when the weather shifted. I set up the machine. I watched over him and thought about consent. About the way that word felt like a gate I hadn't installed in time, and when someone else had convinced themselves they had a key to anyway. By July, the dispute was still pending. That word is the kind of thing that keeps you awake. It lives under your skin. Mom made a show of paying me something every week. 200 here. 100 there. She handed me cash and said, see, like she was proving a point. I wrote it on a notepad and put dates next to each number because I didn't know what else to do. Dad told me, it's temporary, in a voice like he was reciting something noble from a book he'd never read. My friend Tasha, she lives across the hall from me, nurse at the hospital, laughs like it's something she throws on shoulders, watched me do the math. I told her I'm trying to be fair. She said, fair is not the issue. I told myself it would be fine. Sometimes, telling yourself the thing you hope is true feels like resistance. Sometimes, it's just a lullaby. On a Wednesday in late August, when the school parking lot smelled like asphalt baking and the sky over the baseball field had that too blue, we went to the pediatrician because the bruises on Miles's shins looked like the ones every kid has in summer. But then there were more of them, in places that didn't make sense. He was tired. The really tired. The kind that makes stairs look like a negotiation. He fell asleep in the car on the way to the clinic. He fell asleep sitting up while I filled out paperwork, a pencil rolling off the form and onto the floor. Tasha met us in the waiting room when she got off her shift. She said, I'll sit with you, and she did. She held my cold coffee and made it less disgusting with her presence. Our pediatrician, Dr. Chang, pressed gently and asked the questions that were really different questions. Then he said, we're going to get some blood work. I don't love this picture. I folded my hands. I didn't ask him to explain the picture. I just nodded and squeezed back tears so I could count his breaths while they took the vials because counting kept me upright. Riverton Regional doesn't pretend to be big. It's not a research hospital, but it has winged hallways and rooms where nurses like Tasha seem to teleport into your life with stickers and a competence that feels like a life raft. When they told me we'd be moved upstairs because they needed to run more tests, I nodded like a person who understands their job in a play. In a quiet room with an orange chair that had no business being as comforting as it was, a doctor with kind eyes said the word leukemia. He said other words, too, acute, lymphoblastic, but the word leukemia took up all the oxygen. I have a memory of everything. The coolness of the water bottle I held. The way the blinds made lines across the floor. The foggy shape of a woman on a cart, bringing in linens, humming something that wasn't a song I could name. I called Derek. He was 3 hours away. He said, I'm coming, and then he drove through a summer thunderstorm that peeled the sky back like a lid. I called my parents. Mom said, we're on our way, as if she could outrun the word leukemia by getting in the car fast. Dad said, we'll fix it, and for once, I didn't bite that bait. There are things you cannot fix with grit. We settled into the dailiness of a thing that had an edge like a cliff. Miles swung his legs over the side of the bed and tried to act like the world remained what he knew. The green dinosaurs on his socks looked fragile and brave. The next morning, while a nurse adjusted a line and the machines beeped with an alarming cheerfulness, my phone vibrated. I saw my mom's name and swiped without looking. Hey, I said, because normal words are sometimes a raft. Aaron, she said, and it wasn't the voice I needed. The Opal House called me. I pressed my lips together, counted to 4. Mom, I can't. They said they're holding the date, but they need the second installment. They're going to charge your card again on Friday. It took me a full breath to choose the tone of my next sentence. No, absolutely not. Don't be dramatic, she said. We'll sort it out. It will be fine. I'm at the hospital, I said softly, like volume was a way to control reality. Miles has leukemia. Silence. Then a gasp. Then, oh sweetie, and then words, crowded and wet, about prayers and strength and doing what needs to be done. She didn't say sorry about the card again, because sorry was a word she didn't learn well. We'll come sit with you, she said, and then, do you think maybe the wedding should be moved? I mean, with everything. Or, maybe it's good to keep some joy. I don't know. I need you to cancel the venue, I said. I need you to call them and tell them to remove my card and cancel the contract you signed pretending to be me. I didn't pretend to be you, she said, too quickly. Then how do they have my name on their contract and my card on file? We used your information, she said, and if I had had any doubts about whether she understood the words she was using, they evaporated into that one sentence. It's not pretending if it's for family. For a moment, the room felt like it tilted. Tasha put her hand on my shoulder. I didn't know when she'd come in. Maybe she'd been there the whole time. That's something I learned about support. It isn't always loud. I hung up. I called Laura at the Opal House. She remembered me, or at least did the thing where people pretend they do so you feel like this is all very personal. I said, I just found out my card was used without my consent to book a wedding in my name. I need you to cancel the contract. She paused. Paper rustled. The contract is signed, Miss Franklin. It's in your name with your card. It's not my signature. It was signed electronically. Then there's an IP address, I said, surprising both of us. There's a trail. She hesitated. I can have our office look into it. You have a copy of the signed contract? Yes. I'll be by this afternoon. Or send me a copy now. Miss Franklin, visiting hours. I'm at the hospital with my son, I said. I softened my voice because I could hear the line hardening between us. This was done without my consent. She exhaled. I'll email the contract. 10 minutes later, I had it. My name printed neat, like a lie that had learned cursive. My signature, except not. The E twisted wrong. Not my hand. Not me. I stared at it until the letters blurred, then snapped back into type, then blurred again. Tasha looked over my shoulder. She said, this is bad. I know. You going to file a police report? I didn't answer. The word police had weight in our family. It meant something had passed a boundary you couldn't duck under with charm. It meant the kind of line in the ground our mother believed she could redraw with a good apology and a casserole. Derek arrived mid-afternoon with a bag full of snacks we didn't need. He hugged me and lit up the room with his gentle presence. He listened. He asked smart questions. He sat on the bed and showed Miles how to make a paper frog that really jumped. The frog landed on the blanket like a small miracle. When my parents walked in at dusk, their hair smelled like the salon and rain. Mom hugged me like she was trying to press what was loose back into place. Dad stood with his hands in his pockets, like he was waiting for instructions. Mom reached for my phone, the way she always did, to fix things. Let me call them. I handed her a printed copy of the contract. You already called them, I said. You called them with my name. Her face shifted, like she was about to say something tender, and then decided against it. We'll take care of it. You won't, I said. It surprised me how even my voice was. You can't. You put me in the line of fire. You made me liable for something I didn't agree to. It's a wedding, Dad said, as though the word itself justified theft. It's my credit, I said. And my life. Mom's eyes darted to the floor stand, to the machines, to the small person whose breathing ran like a track through everything. We'll handle the wedding stuff. You focus on him. Yes, I said. By taking care of this. Right now. Aaron, Mom said. This is not the time. This is exactly the time. The plan or the breaking point. In my worst version of events, I smiled and took the hit and decided to absorb it the way I'd absorbed most other family emergencies. In reality, I found a stiff folder I used for IEP meetings at work, and I put the printed contract in it, and I wrote in a neat line at the top of a blank page, "Identify theft report." Then I made a list. I called my bank's fraud department. I made a police report. The officer at the precinct took it like he wasn't sure whether to lean into it or minimize it. He read the contract. He said, "This is family, like a lifeline back to the land where we forgive first and ask questions after the cake is cut." It is, I said. And it's also fraud. He nodded, and something in his face shifted. Theft is theft, he said. Even if your mom makes you chicken soup while she does it. We're more of a lasagna family, I said. He smiled, faintly, and typed. I froze my credit at all 3 bureaus, a thing I'd done when my purse was lost once, then undone because I thought it was an inconvenience. I filed an identity theft report with the FTC. I called the Opal House and left a calm message. I emailed Laura, attaching the report number. I put my phone face down on the orange chair and watched Miles's chest rise and fall and counted to 10, breathing with him in sync. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't quick. Every step felt like wading through a river of ridiculous. Every phone call meant telling the story again, but tilted for a new angle. The word unbelievable kept appearing in other people's mouths, like a sympathetic witch had left it in their coffee. Mom called me and cried on Tuesday afternoon, a storm of it. I didn't know what else to do, she said. We promised Jenna. We told her not to settle for something cheap. We told her she was worth it. We told ourselves we'd pay you back. The house was going to appraise higher than we thought, and then it didn't. Your father said he had a buyer for the Ranger, and then he didn't. If life was fair, we would have had the cash. It's not like we were stealing, Aaron. We were borrowing. Without asking, I said. We know you, she said, like she was reciting a defense. You say yes to hard things. You're strong. You always save us. I sat on the hospital bed edge and didn't argue. I didn't apologize. The only sound was the machine's soft beep and the squeak of a cart in the hall that had a fixed wheel. Later, at a family meeting in the hospital cafeteria, me, Mom, Dad, Jenna, the fluorescent lights were merciless. The smell of coffee was burned, metallic. Jenna had mascara tracks on her cheeks, like she'd rehearsed this crying somewhere with better lighting. I didn't know, she said, and for a heartbeat I almost believed her. The emails from the Opal House are in your inbox, I said. They're addressed to me, but they're in your Gmail because you forwarded everything from the initial inquiry from your account, and you were the one who signed me up for their newsletter. The IP address on the signature is from Mom's salon. What exactly didn't you know? She looked at Mom. Mom's jaw tightened. We were going to pay it, Jenna said, tear-bright. I never wanted you to be hurt. Then why didn't you wait to book the venue until you had the money? She swallowed and glanced at Dad, who spread his hands like he'd been asked to show the jury the pockets of his jacket. The date, she said, miserable. We wanted October. They book up. Life isn't going to be what you book, I said, quietly. You can't steal what you can't afford and call it a dream. Dad cut in, voice hard. Watch it. No, I said. I felt a strange stillness, like a lake on a day when the wind changes its mind. I'm done watching it. We're beyond the point where I fix this in the background so your fantasy can float down a staircase. The words felt heavy and correct. Saying them didn't feel like being cruel. It felt like being accurate. Mom put her hands flat on the table as if to push away. What do you want us to do right now, Aaron? Cancel the whole thing? Embarrass Jenna? Tell the community she's not worth it. The community. That phrase made me want to laugh and cry at once. We weren't famous. We were people in a town with a grocery store where the cashier knows what bread you buy. The only community that would be embarrassed was the one in my mother's head. Yes, I said. Cancel it. Jenna flinched. I thought you were on my side. I'm on the side of consent, I said. And the side of my kid, who is at this very moment upstairs, getting poked with things he shouldn't have to be poked with. I do not have the bandwidth to carry your debt, your fantasy, or your arrogance. Dad looked like he wanted to throw the coffee. He didn't. He knocked his knuckles on the table, an old habit that meant he wanted to hit something but would settle for making noise. You've always thought you're better than us, he said, soft and cutting. No, I said. I have always thought we could be better. That's different. I slid copies of the report across the table, like evidence in a hearing I didn't want. The paper made a crisp sound. Tasha would later call it the sound of a boundary growing teeth. I filed a police report, I said. I froze my credit. I disputed the charges. Mom's eyes went wide. You filed a report on your family? You filed one on yourself, I said. You just used my name to do it. I expected yelling. We got something else. A slumping. A deflating balloon. Dad's shoulders lowered. Mom looked like she could fold in half and disappear into the seam of the table. What's the plan? Jenna whispered. I stared at the ceiling's perforated tiles like they might have answers. You can move the wedding to the VFW hall or the community center or Tyler's aunt's backyard. Or you can keep the venue and pay them yourself through a payment plan you set up legally. But you cannot use my credit. You cannot use my name. And if we don't? Dad asked. Then the venue can attempt to enforce a contract signed with a fraudulent signature, I said. They can sue me. I will countersue. I will press charges. I will bring every receipt I have. Which is all of them. It sounded dramatic. It felt like survival. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the orange chair with Miles's hand in mine and watched headlights slip past the blinds. Sometimes hospitals feel like floating islands, removed from the world's gravity. That night, it felt like the most grounded place in town. The reveal. 2 days later, I met Laura in her office at the Opal House. It smelled like the inside of new envelopes and floral soap. A wall calendar had hearts drawn around certain weekends, an army of electric pink. She had the contract again, with a printout of the IP trace from their e-sign platform. She didn't look happy, but she didn't look surprised either. "We did some checking," she said. "The signature came from an IP address registered to Susan Stiles on Pearson Street. That's my mother's salon." She nodded. She held out the paper like she wanted it as far from herself as possible without dropping it. "This isn't good." "No," I said. She put the paper down, smoothed it with a flat palm. "Our policy is to rely on the signature and card authorization. It protects us from people like my family," I said. She looked at me, and for a brief, electric second, something like compassion moved through her face. "It protects us from everyone," she said, not unkindly. "We do a lot of business with excited people. They tend to forget details." "You mean money?" She didn't answer. "Here's the thing," I said. "You have a police report. You have proof the signature wasn't mine. If you pursue this, you are going after a victim of identity theft." "Victim is a strong word," she said, quietly. "So is fraud. You don't want to be the venue that sues the single mom whose kid is in oncology." Her cheeks flushed. "That is not how we want to be perceived." "It's also not how you want to be," I said. "Look, I know you have a business. I know you have owners and profit margins. But I also know your event director took a signature from a salon across town and didn't blink. We do everything electronically now," she said. "We don't require in-person signing." "That's convenient," I said. "Until it isn't." She took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. "What do you want, Miss Franklin?" "Cancel the contract," I said. "Return the deposit. Remove my name from your file. Put a note that you will not accept any bookings from anyone on my behalf without a notarized letter. Send a confirmation email that says this clearly." "We can't return the deposit," she said, quickly. "It's non-refundable, and we've held your date for 6 months." "Not my date." She tilted her head, a small concession. "I understand your position. I'm giving you the chance to not entangle yourself in a family's meltdown." She looked at the papers again, and I watched her do the math that wasn't numbers. A few breaths. Then she said, "I can cancel the contract. The deposit, however, I'm not authorized to return it." "Then who is?" She gave me a name. "An owner." I wrote it down. "Can you also enter into the record that this cancellation is due to signed authorization fraud?" I asked. She blinked. "That's not a phrase we use." "Use any phrase you like," I said. "Just be accurate." She pushed her chair back and stood, an unsteady motion. "I'll send you an email. I can include that the contract was canceled due to a dispute regarding authorization." "Good." She hesitated. "I'm sorry this is happening." "I am too." I left the office and sat in my car with the AC blasting and the radio off. I watched a couple take photos on the lawn with the vines behind them. She did the thing where she laughs and looks away. He did the thing where he pulls her back. I wondered what it would take for me to laugh like that and light like that. Then I thought about Miles and his paper frog, and it hit me that my version of that feeling had brown hair and a missing tooth and a fierce opinion about chicken nuggets. The email came that afternoon, as promised. It was clinical. The contract had been canceled. They were unable to refund the initial deposit. They'd consider a partial credit if another date was booked under the Franklin name in the next 12 months, which made me laugh out loud in a way that sounded unhinged and necessary. I sent it to the case officer on my identity theft report. I sent it to my bank. I printed a copy for the folder and wrote the date in the corner. I called my parents. The phone rang 4 times before Mom answered. "You," she said, "are making this so hard." "It's canceled," I said. "You're free to book it in your own names if you want to pay the deposit again." She made it sound like a balloon losing air. "We don't have 20,000. Then you can choose a different venue." "People will talk," she said. "Let them." Dad took the phone, probably because Mom couldn't function with both hands anymore. "So that's it," he said. "You ruined your sister's wedding." "I canceled a fraudulent contract," I said. "Jenna can still get married. She just can't do it on my back." "You know she always wanted a staircase," he said. He said it like he was reminding me of a baby blanket. "You know that." I thought of the stairs in our house growing up, the ones without carpet, the ones Jenna fell down once and then refused to walk on for a week. "I know she wanted it," I said. I also know wanting something doesn't produce the money to buy it. That's the truth we all live with. He didn't answer. The line crackled. In the background, I could hear the television and the specific, low hum of a household where nobody wanted to say the quiet part out loud. He hung up without goodbye. It wasn't the last time I would be accused of ruining things. It was, however, the last time I mistook their anger for proof I had erred. Fallout. Jenna moved the wedding to the VFW hall by the river. The building is brown and honest. It smells like coffee from the 1990s. There's a mural in the foyer that leans toward patriotic. The windows are practical. The lights don't dim. The ceiling has those tiles that look like a school. We'd had birthday parties there and retirement parties there, and now, apparently, a wedding. She didn't speak to me for a month after the cancellation. Mom texted updates about progress, like it was a hostage negotiation. We found chairs that are pretty if you squint, and your Aunt Lori says she can do drape with lights. It might be okay. Sometimes grief is not just sadness. It's the moment you realize the thing you loved doesn't love you back the way you need. That it never did. I spent days in the hospital that blurred into each other. The lights, always something I noticed, and then forgot. Miles learned words I didn't want him to know and taught me ones I never wanted to use. Port. Counts. Protocol. Neutropenic. Our world shrank, and then it expanded. Strangers brought us meals and blankets, and Tasha sat cross-legged on the floor and read Captain Underpants until her voice went scratchy. Derek took a leave from work. He slept on the pull-out chair beside me and learned how to sit still for hours without cracking. We found a rhythm. Nurses taught us how to coil the four so that story time could feel like story time, not procedure. One afternoon in October, 3 days before Jenna's new date, a certified letter arrived at my apartment. I stood in the hallway with my neighbor's cat winding around my ankles and read it. The Opal House owner, a man whose name sounded like he wore expensive shirts, had decided to pursue the deposit. They would not return it. They would consider settlement. I read it twice, then a third time. It wasn't a lawsuit. It was a warning. A paper prelude. I made a copy. I added it to the folder. I scanned it and sent it to the case officer and to the legal aid attorney Tasha had found through a community clinic. I said, I can't afford a real lawyer. The woman at that clinic, a person named Mariah with hair that made me think of a much cooler life, said, we are real lawyers. We're just free. She wrote a letter for me. It used words like unauthorized and violation and predatory. She CC'd the bank and the police department. She CC'd the venue's owner and Laura and anyone else who could read. It felt like throwing glitter in a wind tunnel. It got everywhere and it made a mess and then it made the mess visible. The bank sided with me. The dispute resolved in my favor. The charge was reversed. They closed the account and issued me a new number. They sent me one of those fraud kits with a sheet that explains your rights under the Fair Credit Billing Act. I read it and felt like a student in a class I would never skip again. When I told my parents, Mom cried. Dad was quiet in that way that meant he was building a new story in his head, and it would not be one in which he was at fault. Jenna texted me the night before her wedding. You can still come, she wrote. I want you there. But you can't bring the drama. The drama, I texted back, was the theft. Please, she wrote. I miss you. I stared at the phone until the words blurred. Then I wrote, I'll be with Miles. She replied with a heart, then nothing. On the day Jenna got married under a ceiling that had seen bingo nights and memorials and community dances, I sat in a room with white tile and held my son's hand. It rained outside in that good, steady way. Tasha brought us popsicles. Derek found an old sheet and tacked it to the curtain rod, and the nurse let us project a movie on it like a theater. Miles laughed at the part where someone falls down, and I thought, take this moment. Put it in your pocket. Save it for the day you need to remember what mercy feels like. That night, Mom posted a photo of Jenna in a white dress that looked like an apology to a dream. Tyler's baseball cap was gone, replaced with a tight haircut. They looked happy. The comments made their own kind of music. Under the photo, my aunt wrote, such a beautiful day. So many prayers. I scrolled. I locked my phone. I put my head on the bed beside Miles and let the whir of the machine be the only sound. Happiness and grief can sit beside each other. They did in that room, quietly. 2 weeks later, a notice came. The Opal House wasn't suing. They were dropping it. My bank had permanently removed the charge, and the venue had decided that the press of this entire thing, yes, they used the word, was not worth a fight. I cried in my car in the parking lot of the hospital for 10 minutes, gripping the wheel like it was a person's hand. Then I felt cold. Then I felt nothing. Then I felt the strange, hollow relief that comes when a thing you thought might drown you turns out to be shallow enough to stand in. The relief didn't extend to my parents. In their version of the story, I had chosen strangers over family. I had humiliated them. I had forced Jenna into a hall with fluorescent lights and served coffee in styrofoam cups. At Thanksgiving, Mom stood at the stove and refused to meet my eyes. Jess, my cousin who works at the library, stood beside me and peeled potatoes with the same efficiency she uses to shelve books. She said, quietly, "You're not a villain." It ricocheted off me. I wasn't a hero either. I was someone finally willing to say no. Dad carved the turkey and talked about the football game and did not look at me. Jenna squeezed my arm when she passed with a tray of rolls. Tyler nodded. The dog from the gray truck sat under the table like a person who knew better than to ask for anything directly. On the drive home, I stopped beyond the river to cry. The lights reflected on the water like the town was trying to see itself differently. I rolled down the window and the cold came in like an answer. Small and exactly the size I could hold. Over the next year, Miles did the work of being brave. Treatments. Schedules. Teachers who sent assignments and notes that made my eyes sting. He got a port. He got used to tape. He learned to negotiate for 2 popsicles when he had to do the thing he hated. He made a friend in the room next door, a girl named Danny with a hat collection that could have been its own YouTube channel. We had good news days. Less bad days. Then afternoons when the counts weren't what anyone wanted and evening walks where the sidewalk felt too long. We bought sneakers for the day he would run in the field again. We put them by the door. I looked at them every night like a promise I believed in, not because I had proof, but because I had to. Mom came sometimes, quieter than she'd ever been. She watched Miles nap and said things like, "He's so beautiful," as if she had just noticed. She didn't bring up the wedding. I didn't bring up the police report. We existed in a détente that made me both grateful and deeply tired. Aftermath. In May of the year after the wedding, the school put on a spring show. The kids sang songs about the weather and planted seeds in paper cups. Miles stood in a row, thinner than he'd been, hair cropped because the growing out looked patchy, and he wanted to own the look rather than let it own him. He sang quietly, and I stood in the aisle and pretended I was recording for Instagram when really I couldn't even see the screen through my tears. He wore a small bow tie. Tasha sat beside me and squeezed my hand at intervals that felt like prayers if I believed in that kind of thing. We got the word remission in a voicemail from Dr. Chang that he left after hours, like he'd been waiting for the right time and then decided there isn't one. It was cautious, clinical. I heard hope anyway. Derek came over with a pizza and soda, and we watched a bad movie because it felt like doing something normal is a ritual we could honor now. Summer rolled in not like a thunderstorm, but like one of those days where the heat is gentle and the backyard smells like lawn clippings and possibility. I got a new credit card. I kept it in a different drawer. I left my old one in pieces for effect. My credit report miraculously rebounded. The fraud flag on the account did its job. The case officer sent a final note before she moved to a different department that said, "Please keep your paperwork." You'd be surprised how often it becomes useful later. It felt like a blessing. A secular one. Mom and Dad didn't apologize. Not directly. They brought casseroles and asked vague questions and told people a version of the story that made them sound harried and misunderstood. I let that go. The truth is a thing with a spine, and it didn't need me to carry it anymore. Then, in late September, Miles started sleeping on the couch again. He said he was tired. The bruises returned, faint. We went to Dr. Chong. We went to the hospital. We said the word we hadn't said out loud for months: relapse. It was a colder time the second time. Not because the air outside the brick hospital was cold, though it was, but because every hallway was familiar and every sound had a meaning we wished it didn't. We did more treatment. We did trials. We did watching and waiting and hoping and counting and bargaining with every piece of ourselves that believed in anything. We celebrated what we could. The nurse who wore a dinosaur tie, the evening they served Jell-O in shapes, the sunset that turned all the hospital windows red like somebody had remembered to paint joy. In January, the collection of days we had narrowed. We weren't chasing something anymore, we were savoring. Miles wanted to watch the same show every night. He wanted apple slices with peanut butter. He wanted me to tell him stories about a time when I was his age and thought the only scary thing in the world was the deep end of a pool. I told him about the time I got lost in a department store because I thought I saw a dog and followed it. He laughed and gave me his best concerned face, a tiny version of me. One afternoon, he put his hand on my cheek the way he used to when he was a toddler and said, "Mom, are grown-ups allowed to lie?" I took a breath that tasted like the orange juice in the cup by his bed. "They can," I said, finally. "But they shouldn't." "Did Grandma lie?" Silence filled the room like fog. I weighed the words the way I weighed medication dosages. "Grandma did something wrong," I said. "She told herself it wasn't wrong because it was for love. But it was still wrong." He nodded, serious. "You didn't pay for it." "No," I said. I brushed his hair back and felt the warmth of his forehead under my palm. "I didn't." "Good," he said, and he turned back to the cartoon like he'd just finished reading a hard chapter and could now go back to the easy plot. There are days that move in a straight line, and there are days that circle. The ones that circle are the ones that leave the deepest indent in you. The week we knew we were at the end was a circle. We rotated through our places: bedside, hallway, nurse station, couch. Tasha came and read him his favorite book in a low voice. Derek kissed his forehead and texted me when he needed to go scream in the stairwell. Dr. Chang sat on the edge of the bed and looked like a person who had seen this one too many times and still believed we deserved his full heart. A hospital social worker named Mark made lists and then tore them up because none of them were relevant anymore. On a gray Tuesday morning, the room moved slowly, the lights dimmed to a kindness, and the machines were quieter. The air felt like a blanket. Miles's breathing changed. It is a quiet thing, the last exhale. We like to think it's grand. It isn't. It's ordinary, like the sound at the end of a song. He exhaled, and then he didn't inhale. I had my hand on his chest. Derek had his head on the bed. Tasha was at the door, and then at our shoulders, and then a step back, and then she was the one who opened the window a crack, because I said, "It's stuffy," and then we all agreed it was. The nurse came in and her face adjusted in that way nurses have to learn. She put a hand on mine and said, "I'm here, and I wanted to ask her to stay forever." We held him until we couldn't. When we were ready, we let them do their work. Papers were signed. Small, bureaucratic things made mysterious in moments like that. Someone made a handprint with paint and put it on heavy white paper, and it was both awful and beautiful. Derek and I sat with our knees touching and said the kinds of things people say when they're trying to find a way not to sink. We said his name a lot. That helped. The funeral was at a small room in a funeral home down by the old train tracks. It smelled like lilies and carpet cleaner. We chose the photo where he is wearing a yellow shirt and stealing my sunglasses. There were not enough chairs, and then there were too many. People cried. People told me about their neighbor's cousin, which was an attempt at comfort that felt like a chore. I smiled and went to the bathroom twice to sit on the closed toilet and breathe until the mirror version of me looked less like a ghost. Mom was there. She sat in the second row with Dad and Jenna and Tyler. She wore the dress she wears to weddings and funerals, the one that doesn't wrinkle and does not stand out. She cried quietly into a tissue that disintegrated too soon. Dad cried the way he laughs, in bursts. Jenna held a sunflower and then didn't know what to do with it and handed it to Tasha without asking. Tyler did that standing thing men do, like they can hold up the ceiling with their shoulders. After, in the parking lot, with a midwinter wind making everyone's mouth small and pursed, Mom took my hands and said, "I'm sorry." The words were snowflakes. Light. Late. But there. For this, she said. For all of it. I know, I said. I didn't forgive her with that sentence, and I didn't not forgive her. I just stood there, and we were two women in coats with grief between us, warming the air. Dad put a hand on my back like he was checking if I was solid. I should have protected you. From so much, he said. I didn't know how. We all should have done things we didn't do, I said. Jenna cried into my shoulder, not careful about her makeup. I wanted you there more than I wanted a staircase, she whispered. I know, I said, and I think I did. She loved me in her way. She did selfish things, and sometimes she loved me. Those can both be true. The aftermath wasn't a single season. It spread over a year like the slow thaw of ice on the river. Some days, I could feel the ground. Other days, I was still in the cold. I kept the wind chimes Tasha bought me on my porch and listened to them when I couldn't sleep. The sound felt like a language I could almost understand. The legal stuff ended the way some campaigns end, not with a bang, but with paperwork filed and then put in a box. The report remained. The bank closed and opened things. I got a letter from the FTC that was dry and reassuring. I put everything into a blue bin and slid it onto a high shelf. I do not look at it often. I do not need to. The lesson it holds is written into me. Mom started therapy. She told me in a casual text, like she was telling me about a sale at the grocery store. I thought it was for people with bigger problems, she said in her next message. Then I realized my biggest problem is myself. I was unkind in my drafts and gentler in what I sent. I'm glad, I wrote. Dad sold the car lot. It's a coffee shop now. They kept the name as a joke. Reliable Brews. Sometimes I think about going in, but the idea of sitting where we once sat with spreadsheets and broken promises makes me tired. Jenna and Tyler had a baby girl in the spring. They named her June. Then they told me it wasn't a reference to me, but a month they liked. I said, good, because the idea of being a person whose name is a debt someone owes another person makes me itch. I love June. She has a dimple like Miles did. She laughs like she doesn't know the word yet. When I hold her, I smell her hair and think about what hope feels like when it grows fresh. Derek and I met for coffee sometimes. We sat in silence, then in laughter, then in silence again. He told me he might move back. I bought another plant for my windowsill because it was the kind of commitment I could handle. I joined a grief group at the community center Jenna didn't get to use for her wedding. The room always had too many chairs at first. Then, by the end of each hour, it would be full. People told the truth. In a circle, under fluorescent lights. There is something holy about that if you don't use that word. I said his name. Other people said their names. We nodded like witnesses. It isn't that I found peace. It's that I built some. Brick by brick, with people who weren't relatives, but were family. What I learned that family, without boundaries, is not love. It's convenience dressed up in a nice outfit. I learned that asking for consent isn't a formality. It's a foundation. When it's missing, everything sags, then collapses, then demands you pretend it's still a house. I learned to keep receipts. Actual ones. Emails, letters, the polite paper trail that turns truth into something you can hold. Not because I wanted to win a fight, but because I needed to anchor myself to something that couldn't be talked out of existence. I learned that the smallest voices, the ones we try to shield, often ask the questions that strip us to the truth. Are grown-ups allowed to lie? Yes, we are. We shouldn't. And when we do, we repair. Not once. Not for show. With steady, quiet work. I learned that grief isn't a river you cross and then you're fine. It's the landscape. Some days, there's a bridge. Some days, you swim. Some days, you sit on the bank and listen to the water and don't try to do anything about it. There are wind chimes on my porch. When the evening comes and the street goes soft, I open the window. The sound drifts in. It isn't loud. It doesn't demand. It reminds me that air still moves. It reminds me that love, when it's real, doesn't take what isn't given. It stays. It waits. It rings and then it rests.